Yep. Good evening. Welcome to the Monday, October 16th, 2023 regular Board of Education meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order at 7 p.m. Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian.
Here.
Mr. Elam.
Here.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Here.
Mrs. Donahue.
Here.
Mr. King.
Here.
Please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The next order of business is approval of the agenda. Before I ask for a motion, are there any changes to the agenda tonight? Okay, we will be specifying reasons for executive session later, but I just wanted to check if there's any other additions. Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda this evening. Thank you, Mr. Elam. May I have a second? Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Any discussion? Great. Mrs. Hageman, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes, motion passes 5-0. Next item is approval of the minutes. We have the minutes from September 14th and the minutes from September 18th. There was one omission I had Mrs. Hageman add. It was just some employees were left out of the minutes under, was it 60?
Yeah,
But
60.
it was very minor, but I just wanted to let people know I did add that. So if you read them before that, you wouldn't have seen them in there. Is there any other, I guess, we have a motion to approve the minutes. Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Mansfield.
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue.
Yes.
Mr. King.
Abstain.
Mrs. Sebastian.
Yes.
Mr. Elam.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. Next, we have public participation. Mrs. Reese?
Thanks for having me. Got a little cold. Get rid of, so hopefully you can understand me. Okay, so here's my agenda, questions and comments. On the important date reminders, I didn't see the booth retreat in there. I'm assuming it's still going on. October 27th. Under classified personnel, the new number has jumped another 2 since last month, with no new resignations or retirements. One seems to have been moved from the other category for a net overall gain on one more new hire. I was wondering if you could please explain the categories. It would be really helpful. Why do they move from other to new? On the classified salary schedule, the van drivers were paid less in the past because it doesn't require the same credentials, i.e. the CDL, and they take less students per trip. Seems unfair to the bus drivers to pay the van drivers the same salary. That's to drive a van. Also, we were told the salary savings was part of the business case for buying the vans, because we wouldn't have to take a full bus. So the business pay for raising the extra trip pay to $18.50 was that other schools do it. So we hiked ours above 4 of the 6 schools that were presented at that meeting. There's no school that pays full rates for trip pay. The reason we paid below other schools at that time was because we also paid for wait time, which most schools do not. Wait time is the time that the driver sits and waits for the kids during the events. With this new increase, do the hours include wait time? Last round, I never got an answer to that question. For the school psychology assistant, is this an additional headcount or is it a replacement? The exterior window protection, great idea. I was just wondering if you were seeking grants for that, because typically in the past we've gotten grants for security protections. The 2 policies and the policy on the regular meetings, it looks like the only changes were to paragraph A regarding the preparation of the agenda. Seems to have basically the same meeting, only with more words. So am I missing something there? Does the additional wording and more restrictions or less on, I guess, what was the change? Because it looks to be about the same meaning. And the policy on the inter-district open enrollment, it has 2 definitions stricken that phrases that are still used throughout the policy. This seems to be the only changes to the policy, so I'm not following why you would delete definitions if they're still used later in the policy. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Reese. Next up is treasurer's report, Mrs. Hageman.
Okay. Okay, so the monthly financial report for September, just a little snapshot of our revenue and where we are. ODE funding is about a 30% increase from last year, so that currently sits at 497,000 more than we got last year in funding. Real estate taxes are up by 15%. Tuition and open enrollment came in totaling 21,000. It says it's 100%, and that's pretty much a timing issue. Those things seem to come in a little early. Interest is up 37%. And it's a 20% increase just since August, and casino revenues came in with about a 10% increase. So actually looking pretty good as far as revenues are concerned. As far as expense snapshots, as we know, salaries and benefits are always going to be our highest expense, but we're down by 4% in salary and benefits, with 8% being in benefits and 4% being in salaries. And it says supplemental salaries because now we have a new time that we're paying, so we're going to see that go up. All expenses have gone down about 20%, which is a little surprising with the opening of a new building, but I'm seeing some of that's going to be timing issues as we get new bills in for the new building, and since we just went live and started running it on September 5th. So I expect those numbers to change. So our current cash is $7,393,259, and that's 134.8 days of cash. And so here's just where we're at as far as with the construction analysis and how much money we have available still in that account as we move forward. And then, of course, this is just the graph of the chart, the numbers that are reflected in those in the presentation. And then we have our investment revenues and the bank reconciliation, which we are in balance, which is always a good thing. We have our check register for the month of September. Anybody wants to see that or needs to review it, most of it being payroll, but that's the check register. Then what, 500 things open for the month of September. And then I'm asking the board, and I added this last minute, so I apologize. We're going to be hosting Ohio High School Athletic Association tournaments because we have our new stadium and new facilities. And we're required to have an O22 account for those revenues as dictated by the Ohio High School Athletic Association and the Auditor of State. So met with Mr. Smith today, and we created this account. So it's an O22 with a special cost center of 9,900. So we can record those revenues and do a reconciliation. So just need your approval to create a new account. And then we have our amended certificate and appropriation recap, which is what we think we're going to be spending and the adjustments that we've made this month in our overall budget. And I always like to point out this AppCom because as long as our cash doesn't exceed our expenses and we have a good number here, we're looking good. So that's what I use to make sure we don't over appropriate or have too much money in our budget. So that's all I have. I'm ready for questions. I went through that rather quickly.
My question back on the construction analysis
Mhm.
with the 2.2 million sitting there, is that because we're still awaiting bills to come in? We still haven't gotten everything for the cost for the new building, or that's money we can use for other renovation projects?
Well, we still have our debt payments are coming out of that. So that's going to be approximately 1.2 million. So it's, so
Okay.
we got to hang on to that as well. But we have a few things still left to pay, but not a whole lot. So I'm thinking we're roughly gonna have maybe about 800 to 900,000 sitting in that account once we're all done.
Okay. And the revenue we generated, the 779,271,
Mhm.
that was off the interest and off the investments. Will we see that continuous, or now that we've kind of expended those funds, will that kind of
Well,
go away?
that's, yeah, that's from, interest that we've earned in our investments, but it's also the 30% that the board has designated to go in there from your tax collection, your TIF
Thank you.
collections, yeah.
That's what I was like, is this going to continuously be there? How we're displaying it? So I just want
Right,
to make sure there's
yeah.
no confusion.
So we still have a couple years left on the 30% that the board designated, I think, so
Good.
we're still going with that.
And I think last we had our meeting around 100,000 in contingency, but we're leaving that there to make sure, because there may be a few things we still need to wrap up. And obviously, there's a gravel road back there that we'd love to pave, and there's plenty of projects. It's a matter of them prioritizing them.
There are plenty of projects.
So
Yeah.
I don't think we'll have issues spending it.
Just wanted to comment that casino profits also includes lottery.
Yeah. Mhm.
Not that we're encouraging.
That's right.
So I just need your approval on those items.
All right, can I have a motion to approve the consent agenda for the treasurer's report, please? Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. May I have a second?
Second,
Thank you, Mr. King. Are there any further questions or discussion? Okay, Mrs.
Oh, actually, I do have one. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I apologize. No, I meant to ask this earlier, but I was interested in Jacob's question. I'm thinking, listen to that. When the tournament hosting funds,
Mhm.
so those don't go specific to athletics. We can use that money for anything.
Well, there's a
Or is it
flat
earmarked?
fee that the Ohio High School Athletic Association will pay when you host an event.
Sure.
So typically it will go to the athletics department, but because they do all the work and they host it, but if
Sure.
that's something that the board wants to do differently. But typically what I've done in the past is we'll look at the reconciliation and how much money they'll be receiving from that. And usually it's a flat fee, like I said,
Yeah.
$600.
Yeah, it's not a ton of
Nobody's
money.
getting rich, right? So then that 600 just goes in as miscellaneous income to the
Right.
athletic department.
We have so much to do on that stadium, so I'm thinking that
Mhm.
there could be some smaller projects here and there that maybe we can start earmarking to go towards some of those smaller side projects or something. I don't know, just.
Yeah, it's not a lot of money, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, like I said,
No, I
it's usually between 400 to 1,000, something like that, in flat fee.
It's just something to make sure that it's kept separate from everything
Right,
else.
We
yeah.
have a ton of small projects out there too, that we've done, so just saying. Exactly, it's
So
every little
something to
bit,
consider,
absolutely.
yes.
Okay, Mrs. Mansfield, will you call the roll, please?
Miss Hagan can.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Hagan. I said the wrong name.
Mrs. Sebastian?
Yes.
Mr. Elam?
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield?
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue?
Yes.
Mr. King?
yes.
Mr. Christine.
Thank you. Good evening, board members and listeners and viewers here abroad. Let's go to item A, important dates. As I said in my weekend preview, we blink and we're at the end of the first quarter and we're getting ready to issue grade cards and start testing and all those things that October brings. Had a great week last week, last week and a half celebrating our seniors and our various fall activities, and that's been awesome. But so anyways, we have a 2-hour release this Thursday, a reminder, and then no classes for students. However, it's an educational progress day, which I've recently learned about. And we'll have a mix of some PD and finishing up grades for the quarter. We have parent-teacher conferences coming up November 2nd. Remember, November 7th, BMS and BHS, high school and middle school, will be on remote learning days because we'll be using Bethel Hall as a polling site for the township and much like remote learning days, but we don't mind being of service to the community. So, and then not on here is Thursday, November 9th, we'll be hosting the monthly meeting of the Miami County Superintendents. And looking forward to hosting them and showing them not only our new building, but the things that we've done in our current building to expand. Into personnel, again, resignations are, the categories resignations are simply people who have resigned for a myriad of reasons, moving, relocating, new jobs. Retirements are folks that have said they are retiring and submitted their paperwork to, here we have two on the certified side, have submitted the necessary paperwork to STRS. New simply means these are new positions created either to help with class sizes, with the new building, split staff, add staff, and most recently is we added a coordinator for, well, an aid position for that handles credit recovery. So we'll have a report hopefully next month because some great things are happening there for kids that haven't been on track to graduate. Transfers have just been either voluntary or most of them have been voluntary transfers within. In other words, folks that have said, I want to go from fifth grade to kindergarten, or I want to go from athletic secretary to elementary secretary. Those are transfers. And then others, those are retire, rehire situations, just kind of that have not fit in to any of those other classifications. But we're getting close. We're down to we need 2 bus drivers and 1 custodian. Notice I didn't say food service. We're full. Yeah, it's a good thing. On to item C and D. So we have enrollment and report card information. We did add a link to the first page of our website that says data and has a report card data and enrollment. And folks that are really interested in looking at both of these things and the stuff that we've been doing enrollment for a while, but we've added the our grade card information on there as well. So it's out there for everybody to take a look at. But enrollment, we were down just a smidge, I think 6 kids, but we're still up from where we were at last May. That's what Mrs. Tegman has up there. So we're still plus 81 since May of 2023 when we closed. So report card data, this is I have 3 charts, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, click on that first one. So these are really just sharing these with the board because we've started to have conversations with administrators. You probably saw that on my weekend preview and just kind of looking at our data because a lot of us are new and trying to look for, just see what everybody is, what each of us are seeing and taking away from our data, especially since we are 3 years now since we have 3 data points since 2020, since the pandemic. So starting to get a read on, you know, what was the impact to us, good, bad, surprise, things that have surprised us. So this one in particular is a look. What I think traditionally folks look at is, well, you know, 3rd grade, we had 64.2% last May or last spring, test proficient or accelerated. The year before that was 72.3. Different group of kids, but still third grade. The year before that, 59.1%. Again, that was the year after the pandemic. So we call this this is looking at it by grade. If we go to cohort look, that one, yep. So this one I think is, again, kind of looks at it a little bit differently because now we have an opportunity. Maybe we can stretch, we lose the side panel there. Maybe.
Yeah, there we go.
So this is looking at groups of kids. So if you go all the way down to the left-hand column, all the way down at the bottom, you have the class that just graduated, 2023. And we can go all the way back now to 2014. Scroll, there you go. And we can see how that group tested as third graders. And obviously, kids migrate in and out, but relatively it's the same core of kids. And so with this look, we can look at, as third graders, 96% of those kids were proficient or higher. In fourth grade, 77.5. There you go. I need one of those little laser. And then go into 2016, 62.4, that kind of thing. Again, looking for trends. So some of our earlier conversations these last 2 weeks have been about, okay, what was that group? Which tests were we giving? Was it the OST or was it still an OAA? Because that changed. Did cut scores change? Did we add new curriculum? Did we change curriculum? Did we have a change in staff like we've had this year in fourth and fifth grade, where we've changed both of those teams? So again, just tip of the iceberg, but we're having those conversations because we're really trying to drill down and see what we've been doing well and what's kind of like, okay, that doesn't seem right because we implemented these things and we didn't get the response or performance from our kids like we had hoped. So we go to the last one. So this was kind of a last within the last couple of weeks, a different way of looking at impact of the pandemic by cohort. So again, that top left-hand column, we start with last year's graduates. And as we saw in the last chart, that group in English language arts was 98.7, as third graders 96. So this one's, without all the colors, kind of easier to follow across. And as we get down to those other classes, we have an opportunity to see the impact of the pandemic. And then at the bottom there, we have, for the third grade test, overall, we've been at 79.4%. Pre-COVID, our proficient and number of kids scoring proficient or higher was 86.5. Post-COVID, it's been 65.2. Big impact. 20% of kids, 15% kids. That's depending on the size of the class. You're talking anywhere from 20 to 40 kids. That's significant. So we want to get all those kids over the bar. So I know it's a lot of numbers, but and it's a snapshot. But as I said with teachers, the curriculum that we pick out, the iReady testing that we do to kind of check in and see how our kids are doing. Everything we do, half of their evaluation is based on this performance. And so we really need to take time to understand and see how we're doing, see what can be learned. So just wanted to share that with the board. No massive aha moments other than this is what we've been up to. This is, we're looking at it. We're trying to understand it, trying to glean the good from it, as well as think areas that we need to get better. And again, those are all available front page of our website. That is the superintendent's report for this evening.
Thank you. Questions from the board?
So it's really difficult to kind of look at this and look at what is our report card, right? I guess thinking in the alignment that, you know, we're 2.5 years post-COVID of the major shutdown, that we were, you know, seeing, we had some pretty dramatic drops following COVID, and then kind of back to some normalcy, I guess, in the classroom. And then looking at the 2023 test scores, it's hard to understand why we would see, you know, 9%, 22%, you know, 12.8% drops throughout the courses in varying grades, right? Significantly. And so I think getting after why is real important, whether that is leadership, that is curriculum, that is whatever. But we should, you know, those are some pretty telling numbers, and we need to get after that, you know, pretty fast, and ensuring that we understand those root causes so that at least in the next school year, we're not going to see those percentages where they're at, but also looking at how are they performing now? I don't know how we know that if we're not testing. We don't test every grade, right? Or do we test every grade?
We started our testing, OST testing starts with 3rd grade. But yeah.
So for example, you know, if I was looking in the middle school arena, 6, 7, 8, you know, when are they going to test again?
So we did some testing, I think in September, and in previous years, we're talking our iReady testing, right? So previously we've done January, and then we tried to do May. And
Okay.
it doesn't make any sense. To me, I want that May test to be end of March to see, okay, are there any gaps we can fill? And so we're going to back up to January to December. And again, just trying to better use that tool and predict it.
So by us conducting the iReady testing, are we going to get results with almost in alignment with what we have here with the state testing? So we'll be able to see kind of the comparison where we were at the beginning of 23 with these results to where we're finding ourselves in December and in May.
Ideally,
Is there a
that's how
comparison?
it's supposed to work, you know,
Okay,
because the state gives us vendors that we can use for to get high quality data. iReady is one of those, and so we're trusting that they correlate. We've not had time to really look at. You take a real hard look at how we've done. You take a look at those spring tests and say, did those kids end up doing what we thought they were going to do on the OST? Right now, that spring test, we're doing it after they do the testing in April. And it's like, I don't know what good that serves us. So we're going to flip flop that. But yeah, ideally, you'd like most of them. Again, having done this before, you get anomalies. Kids have bad days, they're sick, they miss, whatever. You get those outliers, but that bell-shaped curve, you should kind of know in March how they're going to do it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, one of the primary purposes of being here is focusing on education and how we're educating kids and how we're seeing those trends and changing to influence the educational process. So that's what I would be interested in.
You mentioned one of the conversations I had with one of our principals. You know, things happen sometimes, and you have that dip. You mentioned one where we went down 20%. I was like 40 kids. Okay, it happened. My question is, what's that eighth grade teacher doing, or the seventh grade teacher doing with that group? Is that teacher, are those teachers aware that we had a drop? Are we meeting them there? Or are we saying, hey, welcome to seventh grade math or seventh grade ELA? Here we go.
Right. Other things that also come to mind too is that percentages because we had an influx of 30 students in that grade that year just prior to, because we do know we see enrollment numbers kind of, unique enrollment in January and February kind of bump up, when we start the new year. So is that affecting the test scores? Or, because they haven't been in our curriculum working with our teachers as we try to educate. And so there's this fast trying to catch up for them to get to the standards that we're teaching. And that's causing some of the numbers to drop as well. So just trying to understand different factors that are coming in. Maybe that's not it. Maybe it is how we're doing it.
Yeah, again, and it's more than an hour or 2 hour conversation, and and I've learned a lot as I've started to have conversations with some of our teachers and principals about, what curriculum was rolled out when, what that process was, how many of those teachers that were trained in that moved to different grades. I mean, it's just multi-layered. Again, continue to ask why to really drill down before we change it.
Right. Yeah. I think that's important though, is capturing why, right? Why we believe the numbers are are dropping. So that we can understand that for future changes or future processes that we're doing. And not just on that negative side, but also how are we seeing, such high increases in some of the other portions, right? 5, 6, 7% increases in test scores. Why? Right? Is that because of the previous year teacher? Is that, is it this year's teacher? Is it the curriculum? Is it the way they changed the testing? And trying to understand also why we're going, in certain areas, we're going up pretty significantly. And why is that? So that we may glean from those maybe positive techniques. That's it.
Absolutely.
And Jacob, I had always been told students had to be here a certain length of time before they affected the scores, but is that still the case? So
But
you're
it's,
not.
it's a
but-
lot longer, it's a lot shorter time than you
Than you
think. though.
think, yeah.
Like it's
Not like
not
this.
really the grace period you think it is. Like,
It doesn't take much.
it doesn't take
So
much
I
at all.
don't know, so what is that window, do we know?
I'll get it for you.
Okay, I was just curious, because I've always been told, because that obviously does have an impact.
Yeah.
Could
I
have
mean, I'm
a
just
significant impact.
looking at it. Sounds very good.
Can you bring up the OST stats?
This one?
First one. Very first one.
Oh, sure.
So if you look at the right-hand columns, the last three. So I've had questions or statements like, well, we were better than the state average. The SIM average is similar districts, and if you go on our website, we have a chart that shows the 20 similar districts. According to ODE, and they have like, I don't know, 8 or 10 measures, demographics, diversity, those types of things, where they say, really, it's these 20 districts in Ohio that are most like Bethel. And then we have the county average. And so folks will say, well, we're better than the state average. Well, first off, I don't think Bethel's average. 2, the state average includes your larger urban districts that tend to change that average, right? They bring the curve, if you will. And so that's why, to me, the similar district comparison as well as the county average are things that I, again, try to gauge where we're at in comparison. I just want to piece out. Thank you.
And some of what you and Jake were talking about, I've many times been that math teacher who got students who didn't quite have the skill set from the year before. So whatever you can do to provide supports to that teacher who's trying to catch them up, because they still have a test coming at the end of the year for their skills that they have, their goals, they have to have students reach. And it's hard to double back on, say, as a geometry teacher trying to teach kids algebra and geometry. That's a heck of a task, and to still get your kids a passing score on geometry when they don't know algebra. So,
Which is one of the.
or multiplication and division often, or, you know, whatever else. So, you know, the supports that are needed for those teachers who are making up for those test scores who might not have been so hot the year before, whatever grade level you're at. It's a lot. And, you know, we talk about, you know, hiring aides, and a lot of times we're criticized for adding other aides and other positions and stuff, but sometimes we're just getting teachers the support that they need to be able to get their students where they need to be. And if that means that they're working with a smaller group of students in the back to support them with those skill sets, so be it. Sometimes those kids need that extra support and that extra little bit of attention individualized to help them along those skills, because they are, you want to complain about test scores and report card performance, but you can't have it both ways. You have to either provide the support in the classroom and get good scores, or if you don't provide the support, you're gonna get the kind of scores. And that's just how it is. You can't have it both ways.
You know, both ways. And again, all of this stuff really needs to be taking place. That's where I see us going with some of our August time, is really getting teachers to know the group or groups that are coming in and how they finished out, and, you know, find, you know, get them the supports they need if they have some of those kids, and have that plan so day one we can get after it.
Those extra like support math classes and English classes and science classes, whatever they may be, those extra support classes are better than a study class.
Yes.
Thank you for all your analysis. I know this has taken a lot of time to compile and figure out the trend. I also wanted to mention to the board, one of the things Mr. Crispin has been working with the high school principal and counselors on is the credit recovery. Instead of waiting till kids are senior year and finding out we have a problem, he's working with sophomore, you know, asking them to look at sophomores and juniors, so we can, kind of like Mr. Mansfield was mentioning, trying to get them the help when they need it, instead of waiting till senior year and saying, whoa, we've got major problems. And so I think his approach is a really effective one. And I personally appreciate the board's support of that new position to help out that aid. So thank you
We
for
all appreciate
explaining
the
that.
support.
Go on.
Ready to roll on? Okay, recommendations, classified personnel. So item A, recommendation for 5 folks to join our staff. The late strike through was we received a BCI report and had conferred. So we had to pull that last minute. Second, classified salary schedule again, which we got frequent flyer miles for this one, but as we've been talking about, we did add a credit recovery aid, if you will, to work with. We have almost 60 kids enrolled in credit recovery right now, seniors and juniors. Primarily seniors, trying to get them caught up and get them on track to graduate. Again, no, it's not a new schedule. We're just piggybacking off of the current media center salary schedule. So the big proposed clarification continued, again, asking why and learning more. Discovered we had a transportation handbook that has gone, I didn't know about it till about a week and a half. Is talking to Mrs. Rhodes about bus pay and extra trip pay versus substitutes and real drivers. And went ahead and put together this because it just seemed kind of like all over the place with how we have been compensating our drivers. And so you have the assignments for full-time and substitutes up there. And some of the scenarios that just, again, didn't seem to make sense is that if you're a sub driver for an AM PM route, you get a reduced rate, $15 an hour. Or if you're a substitute for an extra trip, you get the same as our full-time drivers, $18.50. Extra pay trip, and then again, same as for full-time and substitute drivers. The van pay, I think I wasn't here when vans were purchased. Our vans have kind of evolved as we've grown. Now have needs to transport children with special needs to their schools. And so currently we have, I think, just one driver that, well, first off, let me say, we're still 2 drivers short of our AM PM routes. So we're still doing double routes. But we have actually 2 children that require special transportation, climate control, nurse on board, and we're using our vans to transport those folks. Well, the drivers are CDL licensed drivers that could be driving bus for us, but because we have this need, they're driving the van. Therefore, according to the way we've been doing things, they get $14 an hour instead of what they'd be making if they were driving one of those routes. It just doesn't seem right. My dad drove bus for intercity transit out in Olympia, Washington for 35 years, and whether he drove short bus, the medium bus, the big bus, or van, he got his hourly rate. And so we're trying to simplify things, make them fair, cover some of these scenarios by just saying, if you're a full-time driver and you're driving for us, whether it's an extra trip, it's a van, in either of those things, or bus, you make your hourly wage. If not, you're a substitute, you make $18.50 if you're taking any of those trips for us. That's my recommendation for changing how we compensate our drivers, both full-time and substitutes. Contract changes. We're moving Ashley Hultgren from 4 hours to a full-time position. We have resignation of Shanna Birchfield, who has been serving as our second shift custodian. And Kim DiCarlo, who worked food service, last year for us, did not return to work. Then we have rescinding of contract for Janelle Hartley, and those are classified personnel.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the consent agenda for the classified personnel, please.
Motion.
Thank you, Mr. King. We have a second.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Discussion?
Looking at the bus stuff, I know back when we originally started to get to the buses, it was about dealing with small teams and moving athletes to different events that we didn't need to take a 44 passenger bus for 3 or 4 students going to a golf meet. So this was to reduce some of those costs and wear and tear on our school buses based on how many routes we were taking, as well as the condition of the buses at the time, right? So financially, it was a great idea to put those in motion. Plus, it allowed us the opportunity to have non-bus drivers drive it because they were vans. And so I would say that everything, here now we're doing a lot more things than just athletics, or running around to the store, or taking trips to see other schools or small groups. So I think that the biggest thing I see with the bus driver pay and the substitute pay is in the bus and van kind of thing is more about having CDL and not having CDL, right? So everything we do is based on certification, qualification, and requirements to be in different positions into the school system. And so I think that credit is due for being a CDL licensed driver which means you've passed multiple courses and been tested, that it doesn't matter if you're driving a bus, a van, or a pickup truck. For purposes of transportation, that you should be paid the same rate all the way through. And then allowing non-CDL, if they're gonna drive a van or one of our vehicles for transportation, then they would have their rate. Kind of my thoughts with regards to that.
What if it's a substitute with the CDL license?
CDL license, whatever the pay is for the CDL. I think that plays the role in it, is having the CDL licensure is the pay rate, not what they're driving. For the purpose of transportation, right? Yes, I have a CDL, so I come to drive the truck to do something that it's a higher pay rate than what I'm making, and I should get a higher pay rate. No, it's just that if I have a CDL doing transportation work, no matter what I'm driving, I should be paid the CDL rate.
That get kind of murky if, say, you have a coach who happens to have their CDL and they take their team on a trip. Doesn't that get kind of murky with their pay too?
Well, if I could, my concern with that is, what's the incentive to not be a sub driver and get on the contract? Right, so contracted drivers get more money per hour, right, and they hold the CDL. Sub drivers get less money per hour because they don't have a contract. They can pretty much say no if they don't want to come to work, right? So we want to pay them competitively. I think $18.50 is competitive and with the market, maybe a little more than what our neighboring districts are paying, because we want to get the best drivers here to sub for us so we can hire them. But I'm afraid that if you pay them the same that you're paying your regular drivers based on CDL, that we might, that might be shooting ourselves in the foot in the long run. If we want to offer a driver a contract to come with the district, that extra $2-3 an hour is pretty good incentive to get them to be on contract and take a route full time.
I agree. Yeah.
So,
I was focusing on the full time.
oh yeah, the full time, I totally agree. Yeah, because it's difficult for drivers to understand why they're getting $14 when they have a CDL.
Do we have anybody currently employed without a CDL?
None of your drivers, I don't think. Do we?
I thought we had one or two gentlemen that just licensed the vans.
Okay. As subs,
For sure, one.
one.
Yeah.
Does this on the right-hand side make it easier as far as treasurer's job and so forth? I'm sure it does. If you're
Well, yeah, payroll loves this idea. Yeah, so we're not keeping track of a lot of different hours and who's doing what. So, yeah, I mean, it's a lot easier for us if it's a substitute and they do anything, they're paid $18.50. If they're a contracted employee, they get their regular rate. So we keep track of all their regular rates, and it's easier for, I think, the drivers to understand their pay. Yeah.
And I mean, quite frankly, if we've still got 3 double, we should be trying to get a van driver in that maybe it doesn't have a CDL, maybe the $18.50 will help us get someone in. Because I mean, nobody wants double routes, I don't think. So it might be an incentive, I don't know. Any other discussion?
Yeah, please, kind of along the bus line. I think I'm not sure what item it was, the new person who is contract changed from 4 to 8 hours. What does a full-time bus driver do all day? I mean, what keeps them busy through the middle of the day?
I can get that breakdown for you and send it to the board.
Now, I do know Monday through Thursday, and Kathy or Brent would probably be better at explaining this, but Monday through Thursday, we have midday routes. So we run the preschool routes, right? So when we're picking, dropping our preschool kids in the morning, we got to go back and pick them up midday, right? And take them home and then pick up the preschool kids that need to go midday into the afternoon. So there's a midday route that happens. So that usually is an additional 1.5 to 2 hours midday. So Monday through Thursday. But yeah, we certainly can ask Kathy and Brent because they make the recommendations. Yeah, what's an average 8-hour day look like for a driver?
Because I know maybe, was it last month or 2 months ago? I don't know, within the last couple of months. I know there was a couple other people who had that same change and I missed up. I didn't get to ask at the time.
Yeah,
so
there
I
were
wanted
2
to-
last month and this is the 3rd, yeah.
So there's 3 total now
Yeah,
at that.
I think there's 3 at 8 hours. No, there's probably 4 because there was one that started the year. So,
Yeah, cleaning and
Thank you.
sweeping their buses, because we all know our children always clean up after themselves. I know mine doesn't. We're loving.
Any other discussion?
We've had bus drivers that work in the cafeteria. Also.
Well, and that's why I know one of them in particular switched,
Yeah.
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 Because it was,
I mean,
That's,
I think it makes sense, obviously, if you can get a van driver who is only van licensed, I think that's ideal. It's lovely, it works out great, and no one's saying, well, you know, I have my CDL, I should be making more money or anything like that. That's fantastic. With this plan that you propose. If they happen to have their CDL and they just want to substitute, cool. I think it works too, because like Tina was saying, Sagan was saying, you know, they are able to call off. They are able to say, I don't want to work today because it's icy and I don't want to drive it. As opposed to, no, you're contracted, you need to come to work today. So there's incentive there to make more money on the hour. To take the full. I do agree.
One other question, the media credit recovery, what does that actually look like as it's being worked during the day?
so credit recovery, we have students that, if they are not on track to graduate. So what is that? That's, you should come into your senior year with 5 full credits to take in order to graduate. We have kids that are double digits behind for various reasons. And so rather than having a study hall, they go to a room where Mr. Coates is, and district for a long time has been purchasing online curriculum, and students can take Algebra 1 or English 1 or geometry concurrent with whatever else they're taking. And so to be in there and be part of credit recovery, they have to show progress weekly. And that progress is modules that they're taking with the online curriculum. The monitor that's in there, Mr. Coates, is tracking their attendance. Because we need a sense of urgency now, not in April and May, which is what we've been doing. And also getting kids in there earlier, which we are this year. So we have kids every period. And as I said, we almost have 60 kids now. And so you'll go by that classroom, there could be 5, there could be 7, 8 kids in there working. Mr. Coates is there to help. We need any additional resources. We have intervention specialists. Sometimes we have our special needs kids that need additional help. They can come and help there as well. So yeah, that's what it is.
And so that's a dedicated classroom
Yes,
here in the high school.
correct. Lucky to have the room to do it. I think that's what's kept us from doing it in the past.
Thank you.
okay, Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. Mr. Crispin, certified personnel recommendations, please.
Thank you. We have no recommendations for certified personnel. Shock. Indeed, we have, because we've hired so many new folks and folks already involved with REFA. We need mentors, and so need approval for those. We have an outstanding stipend from last year for Wolfer teaching CCP course. We have 3 requests for leave without pay, unpaid leave, and then 1 supplemental contract for 7th grade basketball. Our monthly approval for the substitute list from the ESC, and then resignation from Griffith, 4th grade teacher, effective at the end of the year. Appreciate her letting us know in advance. One of our goals this year is to try to get our scheduling done, so we know our staffing by the end of February, so we can be in full early again to try to get qualified candidates come to Bethel. So appreciate her letting us know, and congratulations on her retirement. That concludes my recommendations for certified personnel.
Have a motion to approve the consent agenda for certified personnel, please.
I move.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Comments, questions?
Should the recommended action for Ms. Griffith be to accept her retirement
For
request
purposes-
versus
For purposes of
resignation?
retirement.
Yes. That is correct. Sorry about that.
So we're going to amend G.
Then G to retirement request.
Resignations for the purpose of retirement.
There you go.
Thank you.
Got it.
Motion amended accordingly.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield.
I'll second.
And Mrs. Donahue seconded that amendment. Thank you so much. And I would just like to say thank you to Betsy Griffith. I talked to her before school opened. I think she's thrilled to be in a new building, and she said it's the first time she's ever had windows, so she's got plants, I believe. So the only sad thing is she's only going to be in it a year, but I'm very excited for her. Wish her all the best. And thank you to those who volunteered or who are getting a small stipend to be the mentors. I know that's extra work for everyone, but thank you to all of those teachers that are taking that on.
Well, to the education taking rest as well, because that's also no small challenge.
Both sides.
It's a challenge on both sides, so
Yes.
thank you to both, actually. And also I'd just like to thank Betsy as well. She was my son's 4th grade teacher along with Mrs. Henry. So we had a great year that year. It was a great year, and we love Mrs. Griffith, and so congratulations to her on her retirement, but sad to see her go.
Mr. Crispin, I just have one question, maybe remember that I wanted to double check. Kind of goes back with the retirement, kind of goes back to 5B, the personnel record that you keep. I know that you started that early in the spring last year, and it's kind of been a rolling number of people for this school year. When do you think you'll end that and then be starting a new one? Like, I wouldn't expect Mrs. Griffith to be put on this current.
That's why she's not on
No, not yet.
it. Yeah.
Not yet,
Yeah.
but will you end that at some point? Because, before it becomes too convoluted and it just was,
We'll start over January 1.
okay,
Start fresh.
okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Glad to start fresh. Be happy to.
Any other questions? Okay, Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll?
Mr. King,
Yes.
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue.
Yes,
Motion passes 5-0. And again, remember that does include the amendment for the resignation for the purposes of retirement. Okay, next on the agenda is business recommendations.
Okay, a few business items for the board this evening. Recommending additional 0.54 FT time person, psych assistant to assist our new site. our numbers are that high as far as kids needing assessed. So making that recommendation because of that increase. Item B is a payment in lieu of transportation. These were two folks that were missed from the 22-23 school year. Item C is a recommendation for an expense that just exceeds Tina and I's ability to buy stuff. Your approval, and that is for protective film to be installed by Safe Haven Defense at BES for all of our exterior entrances, including cafeteria and a few other places on the inside, main office, library, those types of things. And so if you remember Safe Haven, it's also the group that last spring that donated about, I think, $7,000 worth of product and installation to fortify some of our areas here in high school and middle school. It's a great product. Got a chance to go to Springfield to see a demonstration last year. And, very impressive stuff. So look for your approval there. We have overnight and extended student trips, Camp Kern trip. Just a reminder, that's not an overnight trip. And then our annual baseball spring overnight trip. Club proposals for the high school. Nice to see these, especially the STEM club, which is, yes, my understanding is we used to have a robotics club here at the high school pre COVID, and now it's coming back as the STEM club. So glad to have that in the game and design club. Kids doing coding, creating games. That is current, and use more kids doing those types of things. The policy recommendation. This is just first reading, and you know, I think these were corrections or recommendations from the OLA to make them less wordy or more clear, especially with the board meeting one. I will go back and ask Norm Burkhart about the definitions that were raised, or a question about definitions raised earlier, why those didn't change in the rest of the policy. So again, this is a first read. I'll get those answers back to the board. And contact me individually with some dialogue. So incidentally, tonight's vote will be minus F, right? We don't approve
Yeah,
first readings. Correct. Yeah.
And on policy 6700, that's just to change the pay period. It's the Fair Labor Standard Act. So it's a federal guideline. So that's the only thing we can change. And it's just to say that our pay periods go, Sunday through. That's the only change. We had it Saturday through Friday rather than Monday through Sunday. So it's the only change.
We're taking out the adjacent district because that no longer applies. You want to?
Oh, yes. One of the things we've run into is the district has one credit card with $4,000 worth of credit. As we get larger, the need for credit goes up. And I did approach our current credit card company and ask about getting an increase and what the process was. And they wanted to run my personal credit. I didn't think that was acceptable. So I looked at other ways to meet the needs of the district. We're having to make 2 payments a month on the credit card just so people can get hotel rooms, and like the kids that are going to be in Florida, they've got to reserve that hotel room now. And so that'll take all our credit. We won't be able to use our credit cards again, so we've got to really look at a different way of handling those. So easy Procure, I'll say that, is a program specifically created for education for school districts. It is a virtual, sort of like a virtual credit card, but you actually get a card and gives the district an opportunity to earn rebates, which is done on a consortium level between Ohio schools and Indiana schools. So it's not a credit card because House Bill 312, there's a lot of rules we have to follow with credit cards. But it's a purchasing card in the fact that there is no credit on these cards. So if somebody takes a card and runs out, steals a card and tries to make a purchase, they're not gonna be able to make a purchase. There's no credit. It's managed by the treasurer's office until we have an approved purchase order and it meets all the requirements. Then we add the credit to the card before they use it. So it gives us a little more control. So it's not just a regular credit card that everybody's out there spending. We can use it to pay everyday bills if they take a credit card, so we can use it for that. So one of the things we're sort of looking at how, since we're bigger, and we only have this one credit card option, how we can make that easier for everyone. And looking at what vendors we have that accept credit cards. I mean, even, I was gonna say Dayton Power and Light, but it's not that anymore, is it? AES. AES takes credit card payments, so you could pay your, the Bureau of Workers' Comp takes credit card payments. And it costs approximately $2 a check just to create a check if you look at all your soft costs and things of that nature as well. So it's a way to save that kind of money. And so just for your review, these are integrated payables. It gives you where we're at and how the rebates are paid out. And I just wanted to give the board and anyone else an opportunity to read through it. I think the most important thing, again, is to take away that this is not a credit card that everybody's going to have credit on their card. And if somebody takes it and runs off, that is, So we'll set up merchant codes that say you can only use it for certain things. So there's no risk of having alcohol bought or anything like that on these kinds of cards. They're actually more restrictive than a regular credit card would be, but it also gives all our buildings the opportunity to make purchases when they need to in an emergency situation as well. So it does come in handy. In my other districts, when I implemented something like this, I've always had an agreement they had that anybody receiving a card had to sign and follow, and I'll make that available to the board as well. So I would like to move forward with this kind of procurement card for the district, because like I said, we're making 2-3 payments a month on the credit cards, just so people, it's a little embarrassing when their card gets declined and it's the district card and it's because we don't have any more credit. It's been used up. So so just a way to keep that moving for the district. So just something for you to consider, nothing to vote on today. And I've submitted a credit application and we'll see what they come back with. And then if there's a contract, we'll have the attorney review it and I'll review it and have the board review as well. So.
When I was working, I'd have an open purchase order for X amount of dollars. How does that are you able to do that kind of thing?
Yeah, you can. I know in the past, a lot of teachers or administrators have used their personal credit cards and gotten reimbursed, but we don't reimburse taxes and things of that nature.
Right.
So then the teacher or the administrator doesn't get 100%. Also, hotels aren't giving you a tax exemption if you're not using a district card. So even if we sent all the tax exemption paper to Columbus and said, yeah, this is our employee, give them a tax exemption. If they use their personal credit card, they will not give them the exemption. It has to say that it's a school district card. So those are the kind of things that we're running into with everybody. But yeah, we have a lot of teachers and administrators that have open PO for emergency purchases and things of that nature
I've
as
used
well.
it throughout the year.
Right, exactly. And we still do that. Yes, that's still an option for them.
Lastly, we have 2 donations from Mrs. Kessler and for medical science. to vote. That's it for recommendations for business.
Great. So we need a motion for.
I'll make a motion to approve this consent agenda as stated minus items F and G.
Thank you, yes. May I have a second? Second. Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Any further discussion or questions?
I would just like to say thank you to the Kesslers and the Kettering Health for their wonderful donations to our programs. Every little bit helps and we appreciate it.
Yeah, and I won't, we don't need to pull from the agenda, but can you clarify with Mr. Smith and Mr. Gulay, because the proposal for the overnight extended student trip is 3/25/2023 through 4/1/2025 in executive, so that just needs fixed. I think the years are wrong.
They're not gonna be gone that long.
I'm sure they'd like to be gone 2 years. It's, I think it's correct on the agenda, but
Yeah, no, it's correct.
I have the wrong dates. I didn't catch it until I pulled it up here, so yes, that's nice. Yes, we'd all like to have a 2-year vacation down to Florida, but.
I'm excited to see the expanded club offerings.
Yes.
Some of them are very cool. They're all very cool,
Yeah,
but
they
some
are.
I'm more personally into than others, but they're all very cool. Those are exciting.
District.
And I do like the club proposals. I do like to see them held after school because if they're held at lunchtime, the CTC kids cannot participate and they miss that opportunity. So yes, that there are to have them after school is better suited to give other kids the opportunity. That's a good one.
Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll, please?
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. K.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0, and again, that excludes 8F and 8G. All right, number 9, discussion for, we are up from.
All right. Little summary for you here. I know, I'm still riding high for Brown Street the 49ers. I'll crash here in a bit, but with the first 9 weeks winding down, I thought I'd share some of the happenings that our teachers are doing. So just a little synopsis, not obviously every teacher, but so for the high school, art. Art 1 is learning about artists from Australia, acrylic paintings, something I can never do. Art 2 is using, encaustic artwork, which is painting with wax. It's fun. Ceramics, I love ceramics. They are working on lanterns right now. And then the advanced students are brainstorming to try to come up with their artwork they want to enter into the art competition where they can win multiple scholarships. Going along with the high school, the Hope Squad Club has a brand new bulletin board. It's right across from Mrs. Porto's room. It's very colorful. Excited about that. Middle school science. They're doing a pumpkin catapult lab right now. Sounds fun. Last week they did the gummy bear lab. Next week they're doing the spooky science day. Turn into a spooky science lab complete with black lights and lots of awesome experiments, including a few dry ice experiments. The Bethel Middle School is also going to do their first store. Part of their PBIS initiative is students will earn V-Bucks or swarm expectations. And then they're also hosting a pumpkin glow on October 28th, where students, families, and community members are invited to decorate their car pumpkins, and then they can win prizes. And then the elementary, they're bringing back Student of the Month program with donut rewards. They wanted to thank all the parents for all the donations for their PBS program they're building again. And then just a quick 200 students are in the choir, grades 6 through 12, which is just awesome. Right now, the middle school is preparing for their musical Finding Nemo Junior. Youth Machine has been in the building, and then the high school will be performing Mamma Mia in the spring in the musical. So that's exciting as well. So I just wanted to share what's going on in the first 9 weeks of the school.
Thank you, Mrs. Brewer. Do we have any facilities updates, Mr.
Just a few. So as far as the K-5 building is going, we're down to less than half a page on our punch list. Some big items like the electrical panel, just the elusive electrical panel. But nothing, crippling, and still running into things that need to be tweaked here and there, but we're doing education in a beautiful building over there. The repair to the track has been completed with the exception of stripes. Yeah, painting. And we'll get to that here fairly soon. And there was some other painting items that they need to take care of out there. So glad we were able to get that in on probably the last 2 70-degree days of this year. So appreciate Peter's Construction making that happen. Visitor bleachers, we had our last football game and the visitor bleachers. And we'll see them again this spring when it's time for track and field. We're working on getting quotes for sound in the gym to be installed in the gymnasium and into the cafeteria at BES. And then let's see, lighting went up. Murphy's Law, right? You have your last regular season home event out at the new stadium, and then the roadway lights were installed. So
We saw 2 tournament games.
we did. I said regular season. Regular season. That's my facilities report.
Are the curtains installed?
Curtains are not installed yet.
Technology Committee, Mr. King, you have anything?
No progress.
Hey, liaison reports, Mr. Elam. That was great.
Had a couple of things I thought were interesting. House Bill 168 testimony was heard following changes. Lets districts develop and use their own framework for teacher evaluations instead of the one used by state Board of Education. Also eliminates seniority as a preference when making reductions in non-teaching staff positions. Also changes some requirements related to dyslexia training. It permits a district to waive multiple dyslexia screenings for students, that is year after year kind of thing. And then clarifies that a district is not required to hold a separate public hearing on a proposed school calendar. They can just discuss that in the regular meeting. House Bill 39 that has the third hearing. It increases penalties for assault if the victim that's assaulted is a sports official, which is a good one, I think. And lastly, concerning the voucher program that the state has gotten involved in, these are just comments. With more than a month left for parents to enroll, Ohio's new universal school voucher program appears to already be more expensive than estimated. Big shock there. The state has received applications totaling $432 million for this year. That's $34 million and it was forecast. Interest in the EdChoice expansion scholarships isn't slowing. ODE says it receives between 900 and 1,000 applications daily. When the 2-year budget was drafted, the Legislative Service Commission estimated EdChoice expansion would cost $398 million for this year and $440 million next year. The state awarded 24,320 vouchers for last year. This year, ODE has received 70,487 as of September the 6th. So, like everyone knew, it's going to be much bigger than what was anticipated.
Thank you, Mr. Elam. Mrs. Donahue, NBCTC.
For the CTC, they finished their first quarter last Thursday. So they're starting off on their second quarter of the year. And then the week after Thanksgiving, there will be 3 days that the sophomores can start going in to see what program they might be interested in. And then that'll be followed up with an evening where the parents can come and check out the CTC as well. So that'll be after Thanksgiving. That's all I have for tonight.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Mrs. Mansfield, student activities.
Well, I don't have a lot, but this says everything, honestly, that your students are doing so much more than what I have. I was gonna talk about how fabulous senior nights were. They were awesome. Wrapping up the seasons, they were wonderful. Not all seasons are done though. I know cross country have district meets this Saturday for junior high and high school. And obviously middle school musical rehearsal will be happening right now for Finding Nemo Junior, which is why we're in here. So they can have. Yeah, this is so much better than, thank you. So much stuff that I didn't even know was awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Mansfield. Old business, Mr. Crispin.
It was a great report. Did you do that? Look, Mr. Dunleer took his kids to the Troy Library in the Maker
Did he really?
space.
Isn't
Yeah,
that wonderful?
it was crazy.
It's
awesome.
amazing.
Yeah, it
That
was-
space is
yeah.
fantastic. I encourage everyone to go there.
Yeah,
Really,
it's very, very-
fabulous.
Pardon me?
He's making his next album.
There's a story there. Okay, so officially on old business, just an update with Lifewise Academy. We haven't found the sweet spot on the expense of helping get their transportation need until they can get a grant and purchase their own transportation. So to be continued. So we're still waiting to hear back from Safe Freight and to see what direction they want to go. If they're going to wait till the grant comes through and they can get transportation on their own. The second was, I think Mrs. Donahue or somebody asked me a question last time about the YMCA and they're part of the agreement as far as supplying a person or persons to help out. They have been doing that. All I had to do was start asking that question to Mrs. Hogan, Miss Jones. They're like, oh yes, they, been awesome. And it's been great to have a set of hands at lunch and at recess. So those are my two pieces for business.
Have a question? With Lifewise Academy, are we not allowed to assist them in transportation?
Well, we have to come up with, we came up with the wording for the agreement and then we had to come up with a fee for paying the drivers, the use of the bus, wear and tear, diesel, and that's where we just couldn't find the sweet spot.
Because we're not allowed to use our
Can't just,
funding for
yeah,
it.
correct. We can't just freely fund it.
Okay.
Yeah,
I'm
they
just
have,
wondering.
they have to pay for those services and the equipment, the bus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just to follow up, don't know if you knew if it came up. Do you know how many kids we have in the YMCA childcare program?
We haven't hit the, I think the cap they were looking at was like 54 and I think we're around 30.
Okay. Are they, do you have a good idea if it's mostly teachers, children? or
I
do
don't
you
have
an
that
idea?
breakdown. No, I don't. Good questions. Yeah, no.
Just one, thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so too.
Yeah, I thought.
Maybe
see
next year.
wildly- Yeah,
It's still like a handsome bunch of
yes,
kids.
and the delayed.
Yeah, and I think maybe by the time it really got going, because a lot of people were waiting in the middle of summer, so like, is it happening? I think they found alternate arrangements and then maybe by the time we were 100%. You know. I think they found all the other arrangements, so by next year.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And next we have public participation, Mrs. Reese.
hopefully I'll make it through this. So just wanted to say that I thought Jacob had the right idea that we should reward for higher credentials for transportation. So it doesn't seem to be van versus bus anymore, but CDL versus non. We've always been a school that rewards for continuing education to better yourself. For the point of sub versus contracted, we've also always had different salary rates that could have been easily based on CDL versus non-CDL. At the last meeting, so it's a separate issue, at the last meeting, an item was added to the agenda about auctioning the elementary furniture that didn't get moved from the old elementary to the new. I sent an email. I was surprised that there didn't seem to be much consideration for saving the furniture that could be needed within a year or two. Currently, there's a lull in annexation thanks to our commissioners, but there will be more annexation likely starting this January. In addition, we are still getting new enrollees as a result of the build out of carriage trails. In the past, we have discarded or sold items, and then we ended up needing new items, which costed us probably 3 to 5 times the original cost. We have a ton of empty classrooms in the old elementary to store the furniture safely and out of the way, so why not store it in case we need it? And just a little comment on LifeWise Academy. They are having an open house this Sunday, October 22nd from 1 to 4, and they are looking for van drivers, and there's an application online if anybody wants to help out with that. They just said you can't do it, so. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reese.
We have drivers, so you may get drivers, we have our own drivers that were interested in picking up extra hours to do it, so the issue wasn't drivers, so, but I'll let those folks know.
Okay, we do need an executive session for number 1. Is there anything else we need an executive session for? Number 4,
please.
okay, number 4. And we have a motion to go into executive session for number 1 and number 4.
I'll move.
Thank you, Mr. Elam.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Donahue. Any discussion? Okay, Mrs. Hageman, will you call the roll?
Mrs. Sebastian,
Yes.
Mr. Elam,
Yes.
Mrs. Mansfield,
Yes.
Mrs. Donahue,
Yes.
Mr. King.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0. We enter executive session at 8:27 PM. We do not plan to take action after the executive session. Thank you all for attending, whether you're in person or online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.